Hey everyone, Michelle Seidling here with another episode of Military Transition Wellness, the podcast dedicated exclusively to those transitioning from military service. Today we're talking about organizing and decluttering your space and your life as you transition from military service. Here to help us do that is Julie Coraccio, the decluttering expert. Julie, welcome to the podcast. This podcast is available on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to be informed as new episodes become available. If you enjoyed today's episode or any of our episodes, please rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. As always, check out our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com for some resources as you begin your health journey.
Thanks for having me. And I just want to thank all your listeners and viewers for their service. My husband's a vet, so I appreciate everything you all do and are doing.
Oh, thank you. And thank your husband for his service as well. Wonderful. Will you take a moment to introduce yourself and why the direction of organization and decluttering?
Sure. So I'm an award-winning professional organizer, but I do things a little bit differently, Michelle. I focus on the entire life. Like I do end of life organizing, and part of that for me is decluttering your life. And so we might declutter spiritual clutter, declutter mentally or emotionally, because it's all related, right? We're the sum of our entire parts. So it's about getting everything kind of on the same page and decluttered so that we can be the best versions of ourselves. So I'm super passionate about it. When people are decluttered and organized, they can create the life they desire, right? Because clutter is simply anything that's preventing us from doing that. So I got started in the work because I was in an awful job. And I thought, what could I do where I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, but I still got to get paid, right? Like all of us who have a job. And so throughout my years, I look back and I was like, people are like, hey, help me get organized. You're uptight. Help me do that. And so that I was like, I can actually do this. This is a profession. And so as I've grown, I've been in business since 2009, focused on the decluttering and kind of bringing in my own personal practice about personal growth and decluttering.
Nice. So basically, some friends just kind of informally asked you to help, and that kind of led to this whole career.
Yeah.
Nice, very good. Were you always growing up in your earlier years? Were you a very organized person? Did you have that kind of knack for organization?
I did. I was kind of uptight, and my mother wasn't organized, and so I think that was played a huge part because it would drive me nuts. I'm like, we got to have everything organized, and if we have our schedule taken care of, then I won't be late for ice hockey practice. So that was a big deal for me. So that was a motivation as well.
Okay, nice, very cool. Now, as it relates to, or I guess, how does all of this relate to those transitioning from military service?
Great question. Well, it's a big transition, right? I haven't served, but my understanding is you're kind of regimented, right? And so you have your schedule for you. And so it's not like you have a lot of free time or a lot of choices. And so that can be a huge transition for people. Some people might thrive. Some people might find it more challenging. What? I have free time, or I have to create my schedule, or I have to get a job, and I have to get myself out of bed. There's, not going to be someone screaming in my face if I don't do that. So it's really about that. Like, how is transitioning out of the military going to affect you?
Okay. So now how does organization, decluttering, all of that, how does it affect, can you kind of give us like a little 101 maybe as to how that affects the individual and what all does that have to do with wellness?
So for organizing, for example, if you have everything organized, you're going to save money, you're going to save time, it's going to reduce your stress, it's going to bring you peace of mind. So being organized contributes to overall wellness in many ways. The same as decluttering. If you have a space that feels good, you don't have mental anxiety, for example, for mental clutter, then you're not going to be stressed out all the time. So really it impacts every aspect of wellness of your life. And so you might learn those skills in the military or you might not have. And so what's important as you transition, how can you be organized and how can you declutter? How can you learn those skills that are going to support you throughout your new life? That's really important. And so we can start with the basics, like with organizing. So you want to look at each room and say, okay, like for instance, as I look at my office, I have my books organized in a certain way. And I just want to say that it's not about, for me, I'm not Martha Stewart. I never subscribe or some of the whoever is the latest popular thing like Con Marie. Well, I can't take a thing and hold it and say, does it bring me joy? I don't know if it brings me joy, it's useful. And so I want to encourage people to not have these crazy expectations. Like, I don't have everything labeled. I know that some people label everything. I don't do that. So you have to find something that fits with your lifestyle. And so working within that frame. So for instance, with a bookcase, I have personal books on one shelf. I have business books on another shelf. And what else do I have over there? Oh, and I have fun little games and cards on one shelf. And so it's very loosely organized. And so for me, I'm like, oh, it'll take me 30 seconds maybe of scanning to find what I need. Now, someone else might be, maybe the challenge out of the military because that's super organized. Maybe you need the labels. Maybe you need everything alphabetized. It has to make sense for you.
Okay. So just there's a lot of flexibility, it sounds like, in organization.
Absolutely. It has to make sense for you. And what the goal is, if I'm organized, like ask yourself some questions. Do I feel at peace when I'm in my home? Or is it a stressed out center and it just adds, I'm like, oh, I'm walking through the door and I'm going to be overwhelmed by clutter? Then we need to declutter and get organized. Can you find what you need easily? Someone says, hey, I can save you $100 a month on car insurance. And you can say, really? Fantastic. Hold on, because I have my policy right here and let's compare notes and see if that's real. Does it save you time in the morning? Do you know where your keys are, your purse and your wallet so that you can get out the door quickly? Or is your kid always late to school because you can't find your keys? Or are you late for work and the guy's like, the third time and you're out? Those are the kind of things that you need to ask yourself and then figure out from there what works for you. Or, if you're someone that likes to have people over or use like, I got to clean the entire house. Someone's coming over. It's going to take me 3 hours. Or are you like, you know what? I need it relatively decluttered and organized so I can pick up within 15 minutes if someone's coming by. That's what I mean about suiting for your lifestyle. Like what works for you and what makes sense for you. Like I don't have a color coded closet. I don't have enough clothes to do that. But that's just something that wouldn't work for me. But for someone else, they might say, you know what? It's super important. I have work outfits on the left side of my closet. So that's easy for me, and casual and weekend on the other. That's one thing that just makes my life easier. I'm not stumbling around in the morning because I'm still waking up. I'm like, bam, I know I have a work outfit right there. Does that make sense?
It does. So it's not necessarily just about storage of stuff. It's about
Correct.
organizing your life so that you can find your keys in the morning or find other
Right.
things.
I want people to see it as a lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, like not putting that unachievable perfection label on it, but how am I going to make my life easier? This is what it's about, bringing more peace into your life. It's not about making your life more stressful.
Okay. Now for those transitioning, I don't know, when do you start? How do you start with that? The just going through and organizing your life.
Right. Well, if it was me, I would start before I'm leaving the military. Right. And so you can call it downsizing. The other thing that's important to me that I want to mention with decluttering and organizing and why I'm passionate about it is, clutter is what's not important. So as you're transitioning, you're going to have a whole new life. So if you have things in your home that don't fit with that new life, let them go. And so, maybe it's a set of dishes and you're like, you know what, every time I use these dishes, it reminds me of the mess hall. And I can't wait to get out and start cooking my own things. So get yourself a pair of bright colored dishes and say, you know what, I move and I get settled. That's what I'm going to get. So one, release everything that's not a part of the life that you're trying to create. And then what you're going to want to do is go through each room, right? And like, especially like with kids, if they no longer use the toys, because remember, it's going to cost you something to move it. And that's a good question to ask yourself. Do I want to pay to move this?
Good point.
Right? Do I really want that? So like you go through the clothes of the kids that don't fit in the toys. And you know what? That's an easy out for you there because you can just, I'm sure, put it out if you're in base housing or bring it or whatever, and someone is going to want it and take it and need it. And that's, instead of having to pay someone to haul it off, right? So you want to go room by room and ask yourself questions like, do I need it? Do I use it? Do I love it? Is this going to fit in my new life? And then declutter as much as you can, because remember, it's going to make it easier for you when you go. And then after you've decluttered, then it's going to be more on the organizing part when you actually settle in your new home. So that's what's great because it's an opportunity to start fresh. Okay, I'm going to go room by room and organize it, how it makes sense to me. And then I am a fan, just again, I wouldn't try to do anything more than a room or a space at a time. And if sometimes a mistake people make is, oh yeah, I got to do the whole house. I'll start here and I'll go to the bedroom, I'll go to the kitchen, living room, and they don't get a lot accomplished. So you want to stay in one area until you've completed it and then set it up so that it makes sense for you. For example, in my office, the bookcase is, I have to get up to go to my bookcase. And I purposely set it up that way because I'm like, I don't reference it that much. But you can't see, but behind me are all my files that I use daily and that I need. And I keep my tax receipts because once I have a system, I check off all the credit card receipts. And then if it's for tax purposes, I put it in the tax folder. So everything that it's behind me and within easy reach, I use a lot. My planner's here. We've got my lipstick because I do a lot of interviewing. And I want to make sure that's close by. So then you kind of do things like that. Or say if you're in the bedroom, for example, and you like to read, then you have a space, maybe you're like, oh, I don't have a nightstand yet. Okay, well then get a little basket where you can gather all your reading material. So with working within the lifestyle and getting organized, is that making sense?
It is. I like it. Just really doing what makes sense and looking at the space around you.
Right. And the thing I want to point out is, my frustration with someone's like, oh, I'm the latest expert. And it's like, okay, you're going to work for someone, but not everyone. So one of the times when I'm speaking, I'll ask people, does anyone drink coffee or tea in the morning? Most people raise their hand. And then I'll say, okay, how do you have it set up? And I'll ask a couple different people this question. And there's usually a different answer. Someone's like, you know what, on my shelf and my countertop, I have everything there. I have my coffee, I've got the coffee maker, I've got flavoring sugar. It's all in this one little area. Someone else is like, oh no, you know what? I keep mine in the cabinet, or I do things. I have everything in different areas, but I'm okay because that's part of my morning routine. Grabbing the cup, making the coffee, putting the cream, blah blah blah, and they're all right because people have figured out what works best for them. So that is what is important. And so you can get ideas, which I think is really great. Say, and then what I tell people when I work with them, test it out for a couple weeks. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But think things through. Like with my office, I know I don't get the books that often, so I push that further away. I want things that I use regularly close by for easy access.
Okay, so there's really no right or wrong answer then.
Right. And I would say one thing that's important, have a place for you where you put your keys every morning, and it's inconsistent. Have one home for everything. If you put your keys in multiple places, well, of course you're gonna be like, where are my keys? And the older we get, we tend to forget things. So if we don't know, like when the house we had to move last year, in that house, we put a little hookup right inside the garage. It was one level, bam, the keys are right there. I always knew where they were. In this house, unfortunately, we have to go down in the basement for the cars. So I'm like, it doesn't make sense how we're set up. So I just keep my keys in my purse. And if I change purses, and I make sure to move it. But figuring out what's going to make it easy and best for you.
Okay. Now, will you give us some examples of those with whom you've worked, how they've decluttered and organized, and really how they've benefited really from that?
Sure. So one of my favorite stories, she was one of my first clients ever, and she was in the military and had transitioned out. So I think that'll be a good example. And so she had in their dining room table, was the dumping ground for everything. Don't know what to do. Bam, it goes on the dining room table. Have to put this away. So anyway, that prevented them from sitting down and enjoying meals together. And it had been a real problem in their relationship. You sometimes don't think about those small things, but it was causing tension. And so the first thing we did was we cleared that dining room table and we got everything organized where it belonged. And so they were able to come and have their meal time together. So that's a thing where a good example of we've cleared physical clutter, we've gotten organized, and it's cleared relationship clutter because they were able to build on that. I've also, one of my favorite things is a lot of times people like to hold on to information, right? But with everything's lightning these days, it's old news 5 minutes ago, right? So I had a client and she had a bunch of stacks. She's saving all these things like recipes and interesting articles to send to people. And I said, well, how long have you had? I mean, it was 2 or 3 feet tall. And I said, well, how long have you had all this information? She said, oh, about 2 or 3 years. So we started to talk about it and she started to cry and she said, I'm afraid if I don't do these things and share information with people, then they're not going to love me anymore. As soon as she was able to articulate that, she knew it wasn't true. And we put it all in the recycling bin. And that's what I get passionate about, is digging deeper and understanding where does the clutter and where does the disorganization come from? Because then you realize, oh, that's not true. Then I can go ahead and release it. And, a lot of times there will be one person who's organized and one person who's less organized or tends to be more clutter buggish. And so that's something that comes up a lot. And so with that, you definitely want to remember you're working together as a team and find ways to work together and fit with both lifestyles. And it can be done.
Okay, I love that. I just love the how it contributes to the relationships, for example, with the mealtime and just really understanding, drilling down to the why of it.
Yes.
Now, do you find that there's usually a deeper meaning or a deeper situation with regard to organization?
Yes, for the clients that I help. There might be people, transition's a great example. You've got a lot going on, you can be overwhelmed, so there might not be that much why behind it. But with the people I've worked with, I found that. So, as one example, if you grew up in a chaotic household, then clutter and chaos is your comfort zone, right? And so, if you
Mm,
take that away, then it's like, oh my gosh, this is my safety zone. What am I going to do? Right. And so, being like, well, let's work on the issue of how can I create a safe space that's not cluttered and disorganized?
okay. So, in that example, how do you help that person to feel comfortable in a new environment since they're so used to that clutter and they're in their comfort zone, so to speak?
Well, one, I want them to honor their feelings. You know what? I'm feeling like one thing when I'm, or how are you doing? Are you feeling anxious? Do we need to take a breath? Stop for a moment. But then how are we going to create an environment that's comfortable for you? So maybe it's with colors, like, oh, you know what? I want to paint the wall this way, or I need to have certain inspiring items in it. And then working through the anxiety, it might be with me talking about it, or, a professional to kind of dig deeper on the issues, whatever helps them most. But what brings you comfort? What brings you joy? And how can we set that up for you? Like, it's going to take me less. I'm going to reduce my anxiety if I have a place where I can meditate. Okay, then we need to set that up in the room. That's super important. Or I know that if I have pictures of my family, that always just makes me go, okay, I'm safe and I'm protective. I have people that have my back, so then I'm going to make sure we have pictures there. And then showing that we can set up systems that it doesn't have to be chaotic and it can still work. One of my favorite solutions for people who maybe have a lot of chaos or creative, right? If someone's like, oh, I've got all these projects I'm working on, like how we were in an office and you have those multiple mail slot
Mhm.
holders. So then everyone's name, like, and then the person just distributes all the mail. I love those because you can set up the cubbies to a certain size. And if you're an artist, then you can throw bits and pieces. Or if you're a writer working on different things, you can put outlines or whatever it is you're working on. Or if you just like to tinker and have a bunch of stuff, then you know what? You can contain it and organize it in a way that makes sense to you. And it's not cluttered. You have everything in the shelves, but it's contained in one big unit. And that's, especially if people are like, oh, I don't know if I can let that go. Okay. Well, let's put it in here and let's check it, write a date on your calendar to check it in 6 months. If you haven't felt that you've missed it or used it, then release it.
Mm, okay. Now, in terms of your environment, your space, are there certain key aspects that really resonate in terms of organization and in terms of wellness?
Can you clarify a little bit? I'm not sure I'm understanding what you mean, certain pieces.
Are there certain are there certain aspects of your environment to really concentrate on that would help you from a wellness perspective?
Well, I would say first begin, maybe you have a deadline, right? And you have someone coming to install kitchen cabinets. Well, we probably want to get the kitchen decluttered and organized. Or, if you're losing money because you pay your bills late, then do with the office. So that's important to think about is a starting point. And then I would say uh, it's really individual, but finding out, like, maybe in your office, like, you need a bookcase like I do. You need a place to, if it's in the bedroom, then you need maybe a place to put your jewelry, or you need a place to put your cufflinks or whatever it is. I'm not sure I'm answering that this well. I kind of do better with it's hard for me to say you need this, this, and this when everything's so individualized. But I would say
Okay.
and then again, setting up a system like behind me, I have the staggered file folders so that I can see all my files at once. That's something that works best for me. Someone might prefer a wall unit where a wall pocket where they can see everything. They're like, you know what, I want them close, but not too close so that I can access them. So really, at times it's individual. I'd say just from a wellness perspective, having a system set up that works for you, having something that inspires you in your space, something that brings you comfort, I think is really important and that makes you feel home. It's also important to declutter at the end of the day, or if that's not possible, at the end of the week, or if that's not possible during the weekend, and to be aware of what you bring into your house because many times we'll buy stuff, but we never let anything go. I've downsized a couple times now. And so that's something else for people to be aware of. Like, okay, have I been buying stuff? Oh, I'm buying a lot of stuff. I'm putting in the bedroom, but I haven't decluttered in a while. So be aware of what you're buying and commit to practicing decluttering regularly. I'm a firm believer of going through everything you own once a year and decluttering. And once you've done a big overhaul, and transitioning gives you that opportunity, like I'm leaving this life, I'm going to let all this stuff go. And then once you do a big one, it's really maintenance is like that, really quick.
Okay. Now, with those with whom you've worked, do you feel like that first time is really a struggle versus subsequent declutterings or maintenance to some degree?
It's been my experience with clients who it feels like they're getting their teeth pulled. The more they do it, the easier it becomes. Like, especially on whole homes, I've had people, oh my gosh, you weren't here today. And this might be after a couple sessions working today, but guess what? I worked on this today, right? Because they realize they get started, we have a plan in place, and they're not overwhelmed as much. So I found it when we kind of set them up for success, the more they do it, the easier it becomes.
Okay, absolutely.
And
And oh, I'm sorry,
and then I
please
would
go ahead.
say, so also when you do that, concentrate on how you feel. Wow. You know what? I feel less stressed now that my house is organized and declutter. It feels so good to be able to not be late. Oh my gosh, you know what? I saved money because I didn't pay bills late this week, so I didn't have to pay interest on it. Focus on the benefits that you found when you declutter and organize, and that's something that can help motivate you.
Okay, so that decluttering helps you in, not just physically then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we talked about relationship clutter earlier, how not eating at the dining room table was having a negative effect on a married couple. So, absolutely. I mean, think about it. If you close your eyes and imagine a place that's got a lot of clutter, disorganized, you're probably going to be able to feel that. But then if you think about being in a space where everything's kind of organized and decluttered, you just feel better. And it's going to reduce your mental clutter. It's going to reduce your anxiety. They've done studies that when you have a lot of clutter, it increases your cortisol, which I believe is what they term the stress hormone. So if you have a lot of clutter, you probably aren't sleeping as well. You might not be eating as well because you're not cooking in the kitchen. I mean, it's really fascinating. Just Google clutter and statistics. And I mean, you can really learn a lot. You might not be aware of what it's been costing you.
Okay, and that cost is not necessarily just in dollars then.
Right.
That's
The older I get, you can't put a price tag on peace of mind.
mhm, absolutely good point. Oh, goodness. Wow. Now, what are you mentioned, just kind of starting with one room, etc. Any specific strategies for, really overcoming, especially those who, it collects and collects and collects,
Yeah.
and it can be overwhelming, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So start small, break it down into manageable tasks. Someone might be listening and say, what? A whole room? Okay, well, slow down, take a deep breath. What one thing can we focus on? So I'm in my office. Let's do the bookcase. You know what? And I'm not going to overwhelm myself. So I'm going to do one shelf on a bookcase a day until it's completed. So that's doable. That's 10, 15 minutes a day. So break it down into manageable steps, write it down as a task. We all feel good when we cross things off our to do list, but it's really important that because if we write it down, oh, yeah, yeah, I'll get to it. And then we never get to it because it's not written down. So that's super important. So break it down into manageable tasks, write it down on your to do list. I think a good strategy is coming up with questions that I mentioned a moment ago, like what makes sense to you? Do I need it, love it, like it? Have I ever used it? Uh, or you ask yourself, could someone else get better benefit out of this? If you're struggling on letting it go, oh, you know what? There's a domestic violence charity down the road. I bet the women in that shelter would get a lot better benefits out of some of my clothes than that they're just hanging here collecting dust than, donating to them. And then figure out, okay, ask yourself these questions. And then just got to sit down and do it. And if it's hard, hire a pro. Remember to take deep breaths. That's really important. And don't move on until you finish one area. So you do that bookcase, and then you say, okay, what am I going to tackle next in the office? And then you don't move on to anything else until you've completed that room. But it's just one
Mm.
step in front of the other. And there are lots of YouTubes, there's podcasts, if you're looking for a little more help that can break it down even more for you. But that's just to begin and figure out what is it that where that I need to start and then go from there. Is that helpful?
It is fantastic. Now you personally, you mentioned, you've got your bookcase organized a certain way, things like that. Now, how do you revisit and kind of declutter, as you're busy with so many things, and you know, in terms of what are things that work for you in particular?
So how I like to do it, I'm old school. I know everyone's is into electronics, but I love the feel of a paper and a pen. So what I do when I declutter every year is I write my master list and I write every single room down and then I break it down like I mentioned. Okay, bookcase, computer, built-ins. I'm in a different house this year. So I write it out like that and then I commit to it. Like I do it over a month. But because we've downsized on a declutter regularly, that's how I do it. And then, I come prepared. I have my water. I'll have a snack so then I can't say, oh, I need to get something to eat and then wander off and not come back. I like to
Yeah.
play music. That helps get me motivated. You might have a friend. If you need help, have an accountability partner. Hey, will you come and help me and make sure that I'm sticking to this? And if you need something, I'll help you. So I like the master list because I like to cross things off and write it down and music, snacks. Oh, the other thing, I like smells. So I have essential oils and I like to spritz. And so, like, if I'm doing the bookcase and I dust while I'm there, I'm like, why not? I'm already there decluttering. I might as well dust it off and do a little cleaning. So, and then bringing smells and music and then I reward myself with something. You know
Mm.
what? Maybe it's a massage after everything's been done or just taking a nice evening walk with my husband, but I make sure that I reward myself. And then I'm a fan of, oh my gosh, of vision boards. What is
Mm.
it that I'm
Okay.
trying to create? And because I'm so visual, I like having that there so that I can see it and it can motivate me. Because there are moments you're like, oh man, I just so don't want to do that. So that's when you revisit. Maybe it's not a board for you, but you have a list of, I'm decluttering because now I want to call into my life this ideal partner. I want to have this job or I want to start my own business. And when I do that, you set yourself up for success when you're decluttered and organized. So what is it that have that list? This is why. This is my why. This is why I'm motivated, and this is what's gonna allow me to continue.
I love it. Just really individualizing it and making it work for you personally.
Yes.
So super, super great. Oh, well, as we wrap up here, any last thoughts or words of wisdom or things that those transitioning from military service can take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, you know what? Don't beat yourself up about this and don't judge yourself and be like, "Oh, how could I have accumulated all this?" or "How come I'm not organized?" Right? We all have our strengths and weaknesses. So don't judge yourself and don't waste time going on that, but be kind to yourself and be like, "Okay, I'm committed to doing it." So just be kind and gentle to yourself and remember, what is it that I want to create? And that when I declutter and organize, I'm going to be able to create the life I desire. And that you can do anything that you put your mind to do.
Fantastic. Well, Julie, how can people get in contact with you?
If they go to my website, reawakenyourbrilliance.com, they can find out more about me, my books and classes, and all the fun stuff I'm doing. And also, I'm a podcaster like you with Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out. Social media can connect with me there. All the good stuff's there.
Fantastic. We'll include all those things in the show notes. Julie, it's been amazing. I really appreciate how you personally do it and then sharing that and really individualizing it regardless of the situation. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me.